All right. Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Aparna, and I am super excited for another edition of Data is Love with my friend, colleague, and co conspirator, Marguerite Martin. She's a real estate agent and she wears lots of different hats. And I'm excited to talk to her today about what we're learning from data about inequities in housing and the role that the real estate industry plays in keeping up some of those inequities. So, welcome, Marguerite. Will you just start with telling us how did you get into real estate?
I got into real estate, I think the way that a lot of real estate agents get into real estate, which is a friend, my realtor, said he thought I would be good at it. He believed in me. His dad managed the company, and they gave me all the support I needed to kind of launch my career. I was 25 years old. I was hanging sheetrock. I'd had I think probably 10 jobs by that point at 25. Like, I wasn't really college material. I have authority issues. So yeah, I was hanging sheetrock and we were at a wedding and he said, I think you'd be good at this. And I was like, oh, that sounds really fun. And here I am 17 years later.
Whoa. Is that a common experience for all people in real estate that they find themselves in a super supportive kind of work environment? What
I
does
don't
that look
think
like?
I don't think that's how most realtors would characterize their journey. And that's certainly not how I would have told the story of how I got my start, 10 years ago. But
Yeah.
with some reflection and context, I think that's how I see it. But I think that the biggest thing is that you know uh, people outside of real estate, people who first get their license, they think your job is selling houses. They think your job is to talk somebody into picking this house, right? Or market a house for sale or something like that. And it's really not. The job is get customers that want to work with you. The houses kind of are part of it, but the biggest piece of the job is your customers. And those customers typically come from a person's built in, they call it a sphere of influence or a network, right? So your
Mhm.
socioeconomic status and yes, your race impact that sphere of influence hugely.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of us don't like to really think about that as being a component in our success, but it certainly is.
Yeah. So speaking of race, what's the racial breakdown of real estate agents? Let's just say in the United States. What does that look like?
Yeah. So I the exact number of agents I'm not sure of right now. I think it's like 2 million, and 78% are white. So that's a big, and I mean, not surprising. I mean, when you dig into the datas, homeownership is pretty white, and until 1968, it was legally constructed to be that way. Black people were not even allowed to join the Realtor Association until the 60s. So the fact that 78% of real estate agents are white is not a surprise considering the systemic.
The systemic inequities in place. I'm
Yes.
really curious, right? Like you got into real estate at 25, you hadn't gone to college, you'd done a lot of jobs, and like here we are, flash forward. I think of you as one of like the biggest champions and co-conspirators in getting specifically white folks talking about all of the inequities that exist and they exist today, right? Like we know that fewer Black folks own homes today than they did like in the 60s, which is should be a red flag. So I'm curious for you, like what was that moment, or was there a moment where like you kind of just went, like something is really off here, right? Like what led you to becoming more aware of the racialized nature of this industry and like housing access in general?
I wish I could tell you that I just read books and educated myself, and that is just not what happened. I was in a leadership program, and we were struggling a lot in conversations around race. And one of the leaders in the group was like, "Hey, I would really, as a side thing, it's not part of the curriculum, but I wish we could all do this program that we do at my work called Race: The Power of an Illusion." And I was
Okay.
kind of like, it's a PBS series. Sounds really basic. Like, but I'm going to be a team player and go to this thing and hear all this stuff I already know. And if you've ever seen that program, which is, I think, I don't know, like 15, 20 years old now, but it's on the
Yeah.
YouTube, everybody.
Yeah.
Definitely check it out, because there's a section called Race, the House We Live In. And they broke down not just the story that I feel like we're given as realtors, because we have to learn about fair housing and, steering and redlining in order to become licensed. Like, we have to be aware of that so that we don't repeat those mistakes. They're very clear. But they didn't really go into, and I don't think in my high school education, we ever went into just how systemic and how brutal that was before 1968. And even after 1968, you say like, rates of Black homeownership are lower now than they were before the 60s. Well, that's fair housing. When they created laws to prevent discrimination, when it became illegal to discriminate, because it wasn't before, it's actually worse, even with a systemic solution. So, yeah, sorry, that was a rambling answer, Aparna.
Yeah, I've also watched that documentary, and the section on housing is pretty gut-wrenching to watch because they walk you through how like inner city housing developments were created almost like a holding pen for a population that they didn't want living anywhere else. And all the ways in which we can see the connection to those decisions and all the things that we know about access to healthcare, housing, like job opportunities, and like wealth, period. Um, I watched it as well, and I think I felt pretty sick to my stomach. It was in my 20s when I watched that series. So I'm just curious, like, what is the data? What is the state of home ownership, of access? What are some of the numbers that stand out to you?
I mean, I think that, and I think it's interesting that, the show is called Data is Love. Like, I'm not as numbers nerdy as you are, Aparna, but I also believe that, like, the only thing we need to look at is the results, right? We can have the
Mm,
best intentions in the world as an industry. We can all say we're doing our best, but if
yeah.
Black ownership is going down,
Mhm.
one of the stats that I sent you is from the Sheba report, which is put out by the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, which was formed when Black agents were excluded from the realtors. They formed their own organization, which still exists to this day, and they do a report every year on the state of homeownership, which I highly recommend everybody check out, called the Sheba report, SHIBA. And in that report, they have this stat. Hey, there it is. Thank you. That shows the undervaluation of homes in Black neighborhoods by year. So, and this is in the top 10% of US cities by population. So right now, as of 2021, Black homes are appraised $55,000 lower than white homes. And this has been shown. There's been so many newspaper articles about this, like New York Times, Washington Post, like they all have their little expose. And, it's funny because Black agents in my office are always like, I mean, no kidding. Like, yeah, there's a difference in the way that a home is valued, not just by the appraiser, but perceived by the buyer, if they can tell that it's a Black home. And that is, I mean, that's conscious, unconscious discrimination. It doesn't really matter about the intent of the practitioners because the system is not set up to prevent that. So that's one example of the way that it is systemic. But I think the bigger issue is this: the difference in wealth held by households by race. So, white households in America are worth an average of 188,000 ish dollars, and Black households it's 24,000. And since most Americans carry their wealth in home equity, and this is what realtors say, right? Get on the property ladder, like get in and start building your generational wealth. Well, white people have an incredible hundreds years head start on the race to build to build household wealth, and it shows in the statistics. So I think those are the ones. I mean, those are the metrics, right? Does everyone have access to housing regardless of race? And is that being proven out? Like, are we showing? And then I think the big question there, when you see this data, because everybody knows this data, I mean, more or less, I think the 2022, no one's shocked by this information. But the question is, and what changed my mind about Race, the Power of an Illusion, was like, I thought I was living and working in a meritocracy.
Mhm.
Like, I built my business from 25 years old. I survived the housing crash. Like, I don't want to even tell you the things I had to do to make money in 2008 so I could keep my real estate. I worked so freaking hard, and that's why I'm successful. And yet, um, there's a lot more to it than just the story that I have from my perception. And the the thing about Race the Power of an Illusion is they show you in the documentary, for example, that it was actually an underwriting guideline in a home loan. If anybody's ever gotten a home loan, they know about underwriting guidelines, which are like the rules for getting your loan. And if a neighbor had more than 15% Black people on the census tract, it was unfinanceable with government loans. With government loans. So the government would not back a loan because it would be considered hazardous. And I think that for people to understand that it wasn't just that our grandparents, were scrappier than
Hmm.
friends' grandparents. Like there is a very clear delineation of when it was even possible for someone to acquire property without an exorbitant exploitative interest rate in a neighborhood that was going to be undervalued.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that so you said it's 2022, like none of us are shocked by the numbers, right? And the numbers are hideous.
Yeah, but it's the
Um,
story we tell about why they're here.
right? If numbers are not going to move people, then like what do you think is going to move people?
Well, for me, it was learning that my story that I earned everything I have was not the complete truth. And that
Mm,
everybody has the same opportunity as me, not the full truth. And I think that, I mean, whether you're talking about housing or anything else, I mean, I don't want to be like a cliche and say like white privilege, but like that is the thing. And I can already feel myself like I come from a very conservative family that deeply believes in meritocracy and bootstraps and all of those things. I can hear them right now, just rolling their eyes. And I think that that's a defense mechanism. If you own a real estate company, if you have a successful 20-year career, it is devastating to find out that if you really understand it, it's not good news, and the solutions aren't easy. And so it's much more pleasant to just believe that if anybody works hard, they can get into a house and they can do just what I did, just what my grandma did. You know what? I didn't get any generational wealth from my parents. I managed it all by myself. I sold my motorcycle when I was 18 and had the down payment for my first house. People, they say these things and they believe that these things are possible now, and they're not.
yeah, well, I think that just when as I've watched the home prices in the Seattle area go up in the decade that I've lived here, and we're watching property values double, right? Like in the span of 5 years, it just feels so absolutely bonkers to me that there aren't a systems of checks and balances in place to slow it down. And I'm sure there's somebody who's going to listen to this episode or is listening now that's going to say something like, well, but aren't you so excited that you get to build your own wealth? And it feels it feels not that great of a win. It doesn't feel like that great of a win. Okay, great. So like now my house is worth 2x what I paid for it 10 years ago, but it means I'm stuck in this house because there's no way that I can leave it to buy something bit better or bigger, right? But it also makes me think, well, salaries aren't going up at that same rate, and like in the Seattle area, when you look at the median income of Black households, it's less than $40,000 a year, and white household, it's something like 125. And for a cut of Asian households, it's even higher than that, right? And so if I make $40,000 a year, like how am I going to get into a house and there isn't one that is less than $500,000 a year? Like that's
Well, at
just
40,000, you're going to be lucky if you can find a rental.
well, I don't think that you are going to find a rental either, right? Because I think the average one bedroom rental is upwards of $2,000
Yeah, in King County.
in King County, which is absolutely wild. But I want to go back to practices in the real estate industry, specifically in how what is the reality of a new agent? And I'm just wondering if you would like articulate for us what it's like to get into this profession, and why does it then leave out people of color, right? Because you said 75 to 78% of agents are white, something like 10% are Latino, and then the rest of it's divided up by different communities of color. So what are the structures of this particular industry that make it so hard for people of color?
Well, I think a lot of folks don't realize that real estate agents are not like employees of the companies that we work for. I'm a customer of the company that I work for. A company like mine, I have to pay them $30,000 a year to use their branding, their website, their staff support. Some companies are more, some companies are less.
This is before you've sold a house.
Well, the way that it works is they take 50% of your commission until you hit that. We call it
30,000.
my company. Other companies have a slightly different structure. So you might pay a monthly fee of $500 or $1,000, or it depends on the level of service. But we're all 1099s. So when you start, the thing you have to understand, like the thing that, my friend's dad sat me down and told me is you're probably not going to get paid for 6 months. And I was like, I'm a hustler. I'm not worried about it. Like and 6 months and 1 day later I got paid, right? Like it really was 6 months. So you need to have the reserves or the partner with a paycheck or the ability to live with parents or whatever it is in order to survive 6 months, potentially without any income. Second, it costs a lot of money to get started. You have to pay for the course, which is I think $300 or $400. Again, I did this 17 years ago, so I think my numbers are roughly correct. But then, you also have to take the state test, which is a few $100s, right? Let's hope you pass it on the first time. Then you have to join the MLS where we put all the houses and share housing information, and that's $500. Then you have to get a key to get in all the houses. That's $600 a year or something. Then you have to join the National Association of Realtors. You don't have to in the Pacific Northwest. Most of the country you do. In the Pacific Northwest, it's optional. But if your company is a member, and I'm at Windermere and my company's a member, I have to join it, and that's another $700 a year, something like that, right? So I think the startup cost is somewhere, and that's just not even to start your business, right? To go down and get your business license with the city, like to do all the things you have to do to start getting the software that you need, to manage your taxes and to manage your books. Like all of that aside, it's several $1,000s just to like be licensed and be capable of transacting real estate. So the barrier is high, not even taking into consideration the fact you have no income, no insurance, no gas money, like nothing. So like you are, and that's why it's so hard to make it. 80% of realtors fail within the first 2 years. It is very hard to make it for anyone. And that is why I think it's very hard for white agents when we make it not to be like, it's because of me, because I'm so smart, because I'm so good. It's a lot of our identity gets wrapped up in our training, and it's reinforced by our managers. Like, you're the ones that made it. You're the ones that know how to work hard. So when you see folks that don't make it, you're like, guess I just didn't know how to work as hard as me.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, exactly. A nice car and nice clothes, especially if you're working median to high end, super important, right? So as a lady who drove a Dodge Neon for the first 10 years of her real estate career, I feel that deeply.
Yeah. I've also heard this term. You've used it a couple of times today already, and it's steering. It's illegal to steer. Will you say what it is and what it looks like in practice?
Yeah. So steering is when, you get a client and you think you can sort of identify where they're going to belong in the city.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting about this, there's like the 101 level of this conversation, which is like real estate agents see a Latino person and they say, I'm going to send you where the Mexicans live, right? Like that's very traditional steering, right? Or, before 1968, it would have been required, right? You would have had to steer people to the section of the city where they would be able to be financed, right? If you steered, if you said to a black person, like, go live in the white neighborhood, all the white people would be mad at you because that you would be bringing that census tract up, right? They'd be getting closer to 15%, which would make their neighborhood unfinanceable, right? That's the history of it, right? Sort people to where they belong. And if you look at the redlining maps from before 1968 and you compare that to the census data from 2020, like you will see the legacy of that remains, right? The health disparities between the wealthiest part of Tacoma, where my business is, and the least wealthy part, it's a 20-year age discrepancy, like your lifespan discrepancy, right? You're going to live 20
Mhm.
years longer in the wealthy part of town than the less wealthy part of town. Like the lack of infrastructure in those neighborhoods, right? There's a huge legacy of that. So that's like the 101 level, right? Is like realtors telling people where to go. But I
Yeah.
think, that's been illegal for a long time. It is like beat into us not to do that. But the 102 level, when realtors are honest, is our clients are steering themselves and they're
Mm.
skilled. So there are a lot of keywords and code words that people use, especially white people, to say where they want to live. Like, I just want to feel safe. I just want you to tell me where the good neighborhoods are, where I feel, comfortable, at night. And like, it's really hard, especially when you're starting in your career, right? To be like, that's racist, or do you mean what you're saying? And nobody wants to hear that, right? Because no client thinks I said that to my agent because I didn't want to live by Black people, right? And
Yeah.
not being too candid, Aparna, you said I'm going to roll it back. But no client
Yeah.
believes that they're being racist when they say that. They just know that they're comfortable where they're comfortable, and it's ambiguous and they can't really state why, but they just know when they go to that mostly white gated neighborhood that they just feel a little better, right?
Yeah.
Or that
Yeah.
neighborhood that was historically Black that isn't Black anymore. Like they just feel
Mhm.
comfortable, right? I don't know why. I just like it here. And that is the 102 that we need to start talking about is clients have access to demographic data. You can tell how your neighbors voted now. So it doesn't matter if your
Mhm.
agent hears you or not. You can get that information. What are we doing with it as individuals?
Yeah. So what can we do as individuals? Right? If I'm like a regular person, I don't even know what a regular person is. Like if I'm just a person who may or may not be buying a house, as a consumer, as a customer, what's our responsibility? How do we do better?
I think what is challenging is we are disincentivized from reforming the system once we are invested in it.
Mm,
So once you own a house, you have absolutely no interest in building more housing to create more access for people because that could impact your property values. And I mean, you're in King County, you see it going down in Wallingford, you see it going down in every wealthy neighborhood in Seattle, like fighting tooth and claw to prevent any kind of density. And they will have all of their arguments about aesthetics and history and all these things. And
yeah.
the humans pile up sleeping, eating, in their streets, dying in their streets, they will not make the connection. Again, I don't want to believe that this has anything to do with me, right? Like to not make the connection between the fact that, it costs $75,000-$80,000 to rent a one-bedroom apartment. You have to $75,000-$80,000 salary to rent a one-bedroom apartment in Seattle, not
Yeah.
making the connection between the increase in homelessness. Well, those folks, they don't know what they're doing, right? Not to mention just access to the property ladder. And I think this is where I've become very frustrated in the last few years. I'm not a policy expert. I'm just a real estate agent. Like, uh, I don't think the market has solutions for us because it's not in the best interest of the market to solve this problem. The market needs a lot of people at the bottom clawing to get in order to return the gains to the people who've made it. And the people who made it make the laws. you know so yeah, I at an individual level, like my commitment right now is just tell the truth about what I see to as many people as I can in spite of the backlash. But I think that this will require a systemic response, and at this time it does not feel like we as a culture have an appetite for the level of systemic response we would need because we would lose.
That feels so that feels so hard to hear. That feels really hard to hear.
I know, it's like people don't invite me on these things very often. Thanks, Aparna.
Yeah, I mean, I think about, like we've known each other for almost 2 years, and I had really not paid a hell of a lot of attention to real estate specifically until I started working with Windermere, and then all of a sudden I was thrown into a world that just felt super chaotic, but also selfish, incredibly selfish, right? This idea that like I'm in it for my own win. It's very like individually motivated because you're not employees, right? And that's something that strikes me is that when you work for a company, you've got to be a team.
Yeah.
You've got to be a team, right? Like you don't win on your own. I don't win on my own. Like I need my team because they have different specializations and right. Whereas real estate is so fascinating because you are a single owner of your business.
Yeah. And I think that the individualistic thing is like a spell that gets cast on you when you become a realtor. And you think this is another reason I think why a lot of realtors are really struggling to, they might initially be like, oh, this is not right when they read The Color of Law, or, they start to learn these numbers. They'll be like, this isn't right. I want to do better. And that's where we get stuck because you can individually do better. You could give up 10% of your income. You could, make a personal reparations plan. You could give money to local organizations in your community that are helping with
Mm-hmm.
and as an organization or as an individual, and you can think that absolves me. I have done my part. I'm a good realtor.
Yeah.
I'm speaking the truth and I'm donating money and all I can do is my part. I can't fix the whole thing. And the truth is, yeah, that's not enough because because it's complicity, right? I think I don't want to be super controversial on here, but like I think about the police and, like the actions taken by police. And I have friends who are police. I've past clients who are police. And
Mm-hmm.
can you be a good cop and watch these things happen and not work to interrupt the system that you benefit from? No, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe that I'm a good realtor, because you can't be a good person, you can't be a good realtor and
Yeah.
work in a system that is making people homeless, that is actively and increasingly excluding people, and say,
Yeah.
I give to the local homeless group. I give to a organization that helps Black agents become realtors, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
good. No, there's no out. And this is what is very hard when I'm speaking to other realtors is like, it's not going to get easier. There's no like win here for us. Like it's not going to get like it's I think people take that Harvard Business Review study that was about like DEI improves performance. And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
we just have like improved diversity within real estate and we facilitate these conversations, it's actually going to make our company more successful. And I don't actually believe that it's true anymore. Like, I think in order to make like housing more equitable, I don't think we can succeed in the way we've been succeeding. I don't like to say like it's a zero-sum game.
Well, I think that it's the definition of success, perhaps, right? Like, I mean, if the only measure of success is I made a lot of money, or if the only measure of success is my house is like doubling in its value in an insanely small period of time, if that's success, then yeah, I think it is a zero sum game. But I think if the measure of success is that we have fewer people sleeping on the street, um right, if like the real measure of success is that a median wage allows you to buy at least a starter home,
But I think the measure of success is further down the road. Like, I think it's those
mm,
stats we started with. The measure of success is white households and Black households have the same average wealth. Like, I think the
yeah,
measure of success is the number of houses owned by white people and the number of housing owned by Black people is commensurate with their percentage of the population. Like, that's success. There is no other metric. And real estate agents and real estate companies and the real estate industry, we are squirrely because we're like, what we need to do? We need to create more education. Because if Black people had more educational opportunities, we're going to give them loans. We're going to give them down payment loans. If they had more loans, then they're going to have no.
mm-hmm.
Like, at the end of the day, our only metric for success is, are things equal? And we are refusing to sort of align with those metrics for a very good reason, because we know the market cannot produce them. And we are committed and believe in the market.
Yeah.
So it's tough. It's tough.
All right, we have one more minute, and I'm just curious, like, is there anybody that's doing a better job? And if so, what is it that they're doing that maybe we could be paying attention to?
When you say anybody doing a better job, do you mean like a real estate agent?
yeah, a real estate agent or a real estate company.
There are lots of wonderful real estate agents and lots of wonderful real estate companies, but you're either in the cycle, you're working to reform an oppressive system, or you're working to like liberate, right? And I think like the people that are doing the real work in housing are mutual aid groups, are
Mhm.
directly giving funds to people to give them access to housing. There's a group in Portland, Oregon, and they, oh my gosh, I'm just totally blanking on the name of this nonprofit. But what they do is you give money to this organization and they help keep Black people in their homes. And this woman had a rental in a historically Black neighborhood that she'd bought with money that her grandmother had died. And when
Yeah.
she sold that house, instead of selling it at the market price, she sold it directly to a Black man who'd grown up in the neighborhood who was priced out at the cost that she owed remaining on her loan, which was like 200 and something thousand and not 650,000, which is what the property was worth. So I would say if you're really committed and you're a person of, if you're a white person that owns property, you need to have a specific plan in place. Like maybe stop working with generational wealth. Maybe give your money to the tribe, give your home to the tribe it was taken from, give it to a family that has been denied access for generations. Like, but those conversations, they're not well received. So no, I don't see people out there, very many people out there doing like revolutionary things, because they are outside of our industry. And I think the change in real estate is going to come from people outside, because there's not a lot of good people inside. I know that's horrible to say. And I mean, I'm a good person, but like I'm not. So I'm benefiting. Yeah, I know. So bad.
Well, there's so many little nuggets that I've taken away from this conversation. And I think that, what stands out to me is like really what you shared in this last little bit, which is paying attention to systems outside of industries that are looking and working really hard to reform. But I also think that this bit around being like conscientious when you're selling your home and not being the person that's taking the 1 million over asking bid, right? Like each of us has a role to play.
Yeah, I don't know that those individual decisions are going to disrupt a system. It doesn't disrupt the corporate aspects, like the corporate held properties. Like there are a lot of market forces in place that create a demand that will double the price of $1 million home in one multiple offer, right?
Mm-hmm.
The individual, we can all do our individual best, but this has got to be a frankly revolutionary, like systemic change, and the appetite isn't there. So I think these conversations need to be happening among people with good intent, so that we're not making moves that make us feel good that have no impact on changing the situation.
Okay. Lots to sit with. I mean, there's like there's like, it's like boop, 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 like happening inside of my head where I'm thinking about, oh my gosh, like what do we do? Like it just feels, between a rock and a hard place kind of a moment. And I want to thank you for joining me today. And I mean, like truly, I want to thank you for being courageous and having these conversations out loud and not in like a back channel somewhere else, so that more people can have sort of their own kind of moments of like, I don't want to say transformation even, but just like the light bulb going off where you're like, like I could be part of organizing, like I can make different choices. And we need that. We need to be more conscientious in how we interact with where we live. So Marguerite, thank you so much. We're going to be back next Monday at 9:30. Have a great day, everybody.